So today we're looking at something pretty disturbing. It's about a whole series of bridge collapses in Gujarat. But, this isn't just about failing concrete and steel. The real story here, according to the source material, is about a total breakdown in accountability. And it's going to raise some tough, uncomfortable questions. Let's get right into it.
Just think about that for a second. You could literally see the river beneath. Can you imagine reading that in a letter about a bridge you might drive over every single day? This isn't some line from a horror movie. Nope. This was an actual formal warning letter sent to government officials about a bridge that, you guessed it, eventually collapsed. And that specific collapse is where we're going to start. We're zeroing in on this one really tragic incident, the Gambhira Bridge Collapse in Vadodara.
And the cost? It was devastating. 11 people lost their lives. And the thing is, the analysis we're looking at is crystal clear on this point. This wasn't some freak accident. It was a disaster that absolutely could have and should have been prevented.
Yeah, and that's the key, right? This bridge didn't just suddenly give way out of nowhere. He was 45 years old and had been falling apart for a long, long time. We're told locals reported it would shake violently whenever vehicles crossed it. It was basically a ticking time bomb, right out in the open for everyone to see.
And if you look at this timeline, it's just, wow. It's a textbook case of warnings being ignored. From 2021 on, local leaders were sounding the alarm, calling the bridge dangerous. There was an official letter sent spelling out the problems. It wasn't just critics either. The local MLA from the ruling BJP party saw the danger and officially recommended a new bridge. And get this, the government actually approved the proposal for a new one. But, and this is the part that's so hard to understand, they left the old, crumbling bridge open for people to use.
Okay, so as bad as that story is, the source material argues it gets worse because it makes it very clear that this wasn't a one-off thing. The Vadodara collapse was just one piece of a much larger and honestly, a pretty chilling pattern happening all across the state.
Just look at this timeline. It is relentless. December 2021, a bridge collapses in Ahmedabad, injuring people. Then, of course, the absolute horror of the Morbi disaster in October 2022. 135 people killed on a bridge that was supposedly just repaired. Fast forward to June of 2023, and you've got multiple collapses in a single month, and then another deadly one in October. It just keeps happening.
So what's the big takeaway here? The source basically boils it down to this simple, awful cycle. You have repeated collapses, and before them, repeated warnings. And what does that add up to? Well, the author calls it what it is, repeated negligence. And that leads to the million-dollar question, doesn't it? Where on earth is the accountability?
And that question, that's where things get really strange. It brings us to what the source calls a massive political paradox. It's all about the disconnects between these terrible tragedies and what actually happens when people go to vote.
Now, before we get to the really shocking part, I want you to hold one number in your head. 135. That's how many lives were lost in that one disaster at Morbi. Just keep that number front and center for a moment.
Okay, here it is. This is the paradox the source lays out, and it's a stark one. In October of 2022, the Morbi Bridge collapses. 135 people are dead. 2 months later, in December, there's a state election. And the result? The ruling party, the BJP, wins. And they don't just win. They win with the biggest majority in the state's entire history. The analysis just puts those two facts right next to each other, and yeah, it's a lot to take in.
So how do you make sense of that outcome? Well, this is where the analysis takes its final and probably its most challenging turn. It starts to shift the question of who's accountable away from just the politicians and points it somewhere a lot more uncomfortable.
The writer really frames this final point as an uncomfortable truth. It's not an easy conclusion to hear, but it's one they argue flows directly from the facts we've just gone over.
And here's that truth, laid out as a question. Think about it. If these kinds of horrific failures are followed not by getting kicked out of office, but by a historic landslide victory, can you really lay all the blame at the feet of the politicians alone?
And that leads us to the final, pretty tough question this analysis leaves us with. It kind of flips the whole thing on its head. It asks, are we the people also responsible? By making the choices we do at the ballot box, are we actually enabling this kind of apathy? Enabling a culture where such tragedies can happen again? A very provocative thought to end on.